All right. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to tonight's Meier House virtual tour and book talk. My name is Eric Rogers. I'm the manager of events and communications here at the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy. It's my honor to help organize virtual events like this. We are really excited for tonight's program, but before we launch into it, just a few things that I want to go through. We do have a couple of upcoming events of note. Hopefully you have all seen that on August 16th, we'll have a book talk with architect and author Stuart Cohen on his book, Frank L. Wright and the Architects of Steinway Hall. And then if you have somehow missed it, we are excited to convene our annual conference, October 13th through 17th in Buffalo, New York. Registration just opened to attend the conference in person. We will be providing a virtual attendance option as well, and look for additional information and registration for that to become available in the not too distant future. Pardon me, a couple of housekeeping notes for these virtual events. The event is being recorded, and we are actually planning to make the recording available to the general public after this event, since there is a book that people want to learn about. We thought that it would make sense to just let anyone view the recording. Please use the Q&A tool within Zoom to ask any questions that you might have. If you're having any technical issues, you can send us a note through the Q&A as well, and we'll do our best to respond that way. Finally, you may have noticed that there are subtitles appearing on your screen. You can actually click on them and drag them around the screen if they're appearing in a place that you don't like. And you can also turn them off entirely if you don't need them. And you should be able to find that setting under live transcript within Zoom. So with those introductory notes, I'm now going to introduce my colleague, John Waters, who is the Preservation Programs Manager for the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy. And he is going to be our moderator for tonight's event. John, welcome.
Thanks, Eric. I'm very happy to be here and very happy to introduce Jason Loper and Michael Schreiber, who are owners of the Meier House in Monona, Iowa. And we'll be looking at a video of the house as well as talking about their new book, An American House. Quick bio for them. Jason Loper has made a career out of caring for homes, whether as a butler, designer, writer, editor, or creator of digital content for consumer brands. Jason's goal is to make the world a more beautiful and comfortable place. This American House is his first book. This American House is Michael's second book. His first book was One Man Show, The Life and Art of Bernard Perlin. And this book was named Stonewall Honor Award book by the American Library Association, and it is being adapted into a feature-length film. This American House is his second book. He's also currently working on a book about the life and work of artist Don Bachardy. In fact, he just returned from California as a Huntington Library Fellow. Aside from all this, he continues his work as of the past 20 years, guiding the cognitive, emotional, and social development of young adults with autism and other developmental challenges. So Jason and Michael, join us. Hey there.
Hello.
Oh, one little known fact that I was going to throw in that much of the Wright world probably doesn't know, you are both big Buster Keaton fans as well.
Yes, we are massive Buster Keaton fans. And in fact, we particularly appreciate of all the Buster Keaton films, there's one in particular called 1 Week that involves Buster hilariously trying to assemble a prefabricated house. To much comedy and shenanigans. And as the now stewards of a, well, sort of prefabricated house. We particularly appreciate that film.
So where are you right now? Are you at the house or are you elsewhere?
We are unfortunately not at the house right now. We both needed to be in Chicago this week for work. So we're at our Chicago apartment on the North Side. So we have a virtual tour that is part of the program here. So that'll be a nice peek into our life in Iowa. And we do have a copy
Oh,
of the book, which is very exciting because there are only 2 so far. The book has gotten delayed multiple times because of the pandemic. Like so many things, the pandemic threw a wrench into the works. So first publication was pushed back because the publisher Pomegranate out of Portland was expecting that the book would be sold in gift shops and visitor centers at Wright sites. And since everything was shut down throughout 2020, they decided to push the publication back to 2021. Well, we didn't foresee a labor shortage. So our book arrived at a port on a container ship in Seattle about a month ago and then sat there. The book was supposed to be released on July 15th. We're now looking at probably early August. We did just hear from the publisher today that the container ship has been unloaded. So the book is going to be sent out now to warehouses. So we are definitely looking at early to mid-August release at this point.
So all of you who have pre-ordered on Amazon, and we thank you, or checked into your local bookstores to order the book, hang tight. It's on its way and should be in your hands very, very soon.
It does exist. It is real.
not virtual.
Yeah,
It's not virtual. Yeah.
Well, why don't we, speaking of virtual, why don't we start in on the video and then we will talk about the house, your experiences with the house and motivations to write the book and all that afterward. That makes sense.
Perfect.
Okay. That was fun.
I assure you all, there's no snow still on the ground in Iowa.
So that's a good segue, because
But
my first question was going to be, what led you to this house? You're Chicagoans,
yeah,
and what was the process?
well, it's a long story. I'll make it short. We often were renters of weekend cabins, just kind of throwing rocks out onto the map, you know, in various locations outside of Chicago for weekends, and began fantasizing about having a weekend, and a simple, easy to get to weekend getaway of our own. Went looking for one, finally found one we wanted. We fell in love with a little cabin in Spring Green, Wisconsin, of all places. And while we already certainly had an interest in Frank Lloyd Wright's work, you know, we weren't actively seeking to plant ourselves somewhere near Wright properties, or didn't even dream of planting ourselves in one. But we started the process of buying this small cabin in Spring Green. We started visiting Wright sites. The sale fell through on inspection. It was discovered that there were some serious problems with the property, and we very disappointedly walked away. But our interest in Frank Lloyd Wright's work had been elevated beyond belief all this time we were spending up in Spring Green. And so just in looking at an architectural blog, a listing for this house in Monona, Iowa popped up. And now this didn't meet any of our criteria. We wanted a small, low maintenance cabin within a 2-hour drive, maybe 3 hours of Chicago, and remote, you know, on some land or in woods, or and what this house in Monona instead presented to us was a 2-story full family home in a small town, a 5-hour drive away from Chicago. It took me a couple of weeks to talk him into just going out and having a look, but just to satisfy our curiosity, we did, and we walked in, and before we had completed the tour with the realtor, we were talking about making an offer, and that was it. Love at first sight, I guess, the old story.
Truly, despite all of the very colorful rooms and all of the painted woodwork, you know, we could see the beautiful bones under all of that, and we're excited to take on the project and to, you know, try to bring the house somewhat back to its older state.
And the realtor and previous owners had essentially baited the mousetrap for us with the most delicious cheese by setting out on the counter all the documentation that had been acquired on the house, on its history. It wasn't a lot at that point, but it documented the authentication process that previous longtime stewards, Becky and Peter Olofsson, had undertaken to have the house identified. It hadn't even been identified as a Frank Lloyd Wright designed American system-built home.
And in fact, when the Olofssons bought the house in the 70s, it wasn't even advertised as a Wright house. You know, it was something that just flew under the radar. You know, his American system-built homes were very much undiscovered. It was something that Wright didn't really talk about later in his career. After it happened, it was like in the past. And I think he was the kind of person who just moved on, always looking forward and not really looking back.
Yeah.
So it was the Olofssons who did the work of having authenticated that letter from Bruce Brooks Pfeiffer that was in the video, was one of the things that was on the counter, part of the mousetrap that we got snapped into.
And also in the collection, they had some communication with the daughter of the Meiers, who by the time we came to the house, she was long deceased. And included with that letter were some vintage photographs of the house. So that also got our wheels turning, that there's a story, but possibly many stories here behind this 100-year-old house, and our imaginations just ran wild thinking about not only the possibilities for the house and trying to bring it back as much as we could, but also what stories were embedded in the walls, and which of any of them we might be able to extract.
So while it didn't meet our original expectations of a small space a couple hours outside of town, it did check off some other boxes. Michael is a history buff and a nerd, I call him affectionately. And I'm a DIYer and I like house projects. And so this seemed like the perfect space for the two of us. He could dive into the history, I could dive into the house projects, and we could live happily ever after.
That's great. And clearly, Jason, you've been very busy. And I would like to remind people that the Q&A is available for questions. And one of the questions, which I was going to ask, but it got asked anyway, is the information you had on the woodwork. Were there specs? Do you know the wood type, et cetera?
What we stumbled into, not knowing when we bought this house, there was really scant information about the American system-built homes to be found. I mean, we were scouring libraries, the internet, we really couldn't find a whole lot of information. But happily, we quickly learned that this was a project for which Wright and his associates during that period in the mid-19-teens produced the most significant number of drawings and specifications toward the entirety of the American system-built homes project. So that includes not only our house, which is a model M202 American system-built home, but across the entire system. So these drawings are all now kept preserved at the Avery Architectural Library at Columbia University. So within months of buying the house, we were on a plane to New York, and none of it had been cataloged. So they brought out cart after cart stacked with, these drawings, sheathed in these mylar casings, and we poured through them all, learning so much about the entire system and finding so many similarities between elements in our house and others, until we came to the exact plans for our home and all the specifications for everything. One treasure that we inherited walking into the house, an original blueprint for the house, had been found in the attic of the house in the 1960s. And so owners have passed it on, stewards have passed it on one to the next. So it was framed and on a wall when we walked in. So that was another tantalizing little treat for us. But there was so much, that and so much more we found at the Avery.
But the plans for the built-ins that would have flanked the fireplace, we did find those. There are plans that we could rebuild the closet upstairs, the wardrobes that had been pulled out. So all of those plans do exist at the Avery Library. So we've definitely have an eye toward trying to have some of those elements rebuilt.
We've also, it's been wonderful that we've become friends with other owners of American system-built homes, and have also consulted with Mike Lillick and the wonderful people in Milwaukee who are working on the Burnham Block properties. And so we've been able to all compare notes about our houses, the consistencies among them. One of the fun creative challenges and for all of us is that these houses, once they went out and were built on site, although everything was pre-planned, certain adjustments and tweaks could be made by contractors and owners once they were building, because there was no real direct supervision on site from Frank Lloyd Wright or his partner Arthur Richards or Russell Moore Williamson or anyone who was involved, back in the home offices.
Which may contribute to why he didn't talk about these later, because he kind of lost control of it, once they went out to be built.
Yeah. So our house pretty faithfully follows the M202 plan, but there are some little changes that the Meiers made, and we can talk about those in a bit. But I'm sure there are more questions you'd like to get to.
Well, I was going to, I really like that you brought up that there's been this sort of subgroup of ASBH owners, because we actually met for the first time in 2015 at another ASBH homeowner who was having the 100th anniversary party. And there were a number of the owners there at that point in time. So it really is, that's part of what the Conservancy really tries to foster, these linkages between building stewards and what you all can learn from each other. So that's a really fun thing with the ASBH owners.
Oh, it's been so tremendously rewarding for us, and that extends beyond the ASBH owners. We've been wonderfully contacted, or people have contacted us from other Wright sites, people who own the sites, or even people who manage some of the public sites. It's been really wonderful to tap into their resources to share what we're learning about our home and its place in this bigger story of the American System Built Homes project, for sure, but then the even bigger story of Frank Lloyd Wright's very long and storied career.
And that really fits in with part of our interest in this house and architecture in general, is that without the people inside of it, a house is just a building. It's the people who make it a home. And so after we bought the house and we started meeting the former owners and getting to know them and hearing their oral history of, their experience in the house, and then meeting the other ASBH owners, it really cemented that thought, that it's the people that make it, and it's the stewards who are going to keep these homes, viable as homes. So often, homes that are before the American System of Homes were really identified, there could have been more of them. There was one in Gary that unfortunately burned down, because it didn't have the love that this current crop of stewards are giving them.
Well, that also brings to mind that there are actually 2 books by American System Built homeowners coming out this summer. And what I think is so fun about them is they're very complementary. They're not overlapping at all. We have Nick Hayes's book. We had a book talk with Nick a while back, which is very much about the process of the American System Built home with Richards and Wright and all sorts of things like that, focusing on the house that he and his wife Angela own up in Shorewood, Wisconsin, whereas yours is exactly as you're saying. It's very much about, your title says it in terms of this American house. It's very much about an American house story. If you want to elaborate any on the specifics of that, feel free.
Again, unintentionally, when buying this house, we stumbled into this tremendous history of our specific house. As interested as we were, and certainly all we wanted to learn about the American System Built Homes project and how this fit into it, and into Wright's career, we were so lucky. One of the advantages of buying a home in a very small town, Little Mayberry in Iowa, is that everybody, we were so wonderfully welcomed, and everyone was, I was the Meiers paper boy, you should meet Betty Keesaw. She and her husband were the young couple who bought the house after The Meyers aged out and passed away, and Betty, Betty's now in her 80s and you should meet her. Well, of course we had to meet Betty, and she was she and her son were our first guests in the home, and it was so wonderful to walk her through the house for the first time in 50 years and have her say, those floors, I remember those floors. I was down scrubbing them. We were going to host a card party and the phone was ringing, and I picked up the phone and my neighbor was saying, turn on your television, President Kennedy has been shot. And those, I remember those glass swinging doors because I had toddlers and I was forever wiping off little handprints. So we were collecting those wonderful, rich stories that tied a lot of history, but also a lot of living, actual people conducting their lives in this small town in Iowa, but in this really remarkable historic house, and then asking them and getting their views on the functionality of the house as a family house. Did they know about its pedigree? Were they proud of it? Was that something that they tried to downplay? And then in the 60s, another set of owners who came in, and by that point in time, any sort of attachment to the house's pedigree as a Wright home, it just wasn't really discussed. It wasn't advertised when the house was sold. I'm sure they knew about it. They were the people who found the blueprints in the attic, after all. But it was in their eyes a very dark home with a lot of dark woodwork and a very vintage looking house for 1966, let's say. So they made some functional adaptations in their perspective to suit their family and the times. Gutting and redoing the kitchen. Same with a bathroom, installing a second bathroom. Unfortunately, they painted over all the woodwork, but that's been, a lot of labor. It's been a remedy that we've been able to bring back the original woodwork that's still lurking under there. But they changed the facade of the house because they wanted a big garage to accommodate a car that wouldn't fit into the tiny little vintage garage that still exists in the back of the house. So and then after them, the Olafsons, who still live in the area, are wonderful, have become really good friends of ours. They were in the house for over 3 decades, school teachers in the area. And they really worked not to restore so much, but to preserve. They had very busy lives, teaching, raising a young family. But it's to their credit that the windows have survived. The walls, the exterior stucco, we still have our original pebble dash stucco on the outside of the house that hasn't been painted over or sided over or completely chipped off, taken away. So it's really due to their work, and they also got the house authenticated, did the work as well. So we've really, through getting to know these stewards and then family members of the Meyers, we've gotten to know their grandson and his wife, who have filled in stories and photos for us about their time in the house. We've really come to see this house as a living, breathing entity that is adapted to the changing times, to the different needs of the families that have lived in it over the past 100 years. And that ultimately, though, it's kind of served Wright's original purpose for a house like this, that it was an architecturally distinctive but affordable house for a middle-class family. And it's still serving that function 104 years after its construction.
And so while our inclination might be to take the house back to its original 1917 appearance, we're also reticent about that because some of the changes that were made, have helped it evolve into being a 21st century home. Having a modern kitchen with a dishwasher and a space for a large refrigerator was a change that had to be made in the 60s, and it makes it much easier to live there now in the 21st century. The the porch extension and the roofline extension and the breezeway that was added in the rural Midwest. And we're in Northeast Iowa, closer to, we're like an hour away from Minnesota. So you can imagine we get some winter there, we get some snow. So that breezeway and the roofline extension serves a purpose. It protects the walkway between the new garage and the door. There's also a new hoods that go over all of the windows. That's helped preserve the windows from those harsh winters and the storms and the rain. So that's why we have over 100-year-old wood windows that are still, hanging in there. So we are trying to be respectful of our changes, trying to take the house back to its original state as much as we can, but also, being very aware that we want this to be a family home going forward. Whenever we leave it, we want a family to move in and call this a home, for the next 100 years.
We've got a number of questions that we might lead into. And speaking of the windows, we do have one question about the caming in the windows, the art glass. And is there a pattern to the windows that have caming and windows that don't?
As in where they're placed?
Yeah.
Yes. The bank of windows over the window box in the living room and the doors in the living room are the only first floor windows that have that design. And then upstairs, all of the corner windows, so that's in each of the bedrooms, have that design as well.
Each of the 3 bedrooms, and it's a characteristic American system built home design that in the book you'll see we do reprint the plans, the original plans for this window. We do have in the stairwell there are some very tall, skinny windows, but they just have a horizontal line of caming going through them, not the tulip.
I think that's my favorite window in the house. I love that window.
the tall, skinny one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Well, and
really
honestly, those skinny windows in the hallway were one of the things that when we first walked in, we were like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. It brings this beautiful light into that very tall stairwell. And then that set of window is on the faces west. And so we get these beautiful orangey red sunsets that glow in those windows. So it's absolutely beautiful.
as the ever ongoing project of stripping and reclaiming the woodwork from years of being painted over continues, which began with the public rooms, really, the living room and dining room, and now have moved up, as you saw in the video, have moved up the stairwell and we've yet to get up to tackling floor number 2 in the stripping, but that's in phase, where are we at? About phase 28 now. But to see the horizontal lines that were intended by Frank Lloyd Wright for across the vocabulary that he expressed in all of his architecture, but particularly as it's seen in our house. It's just remarkable, how it catches the eye now. It was languishing under this white paint. And now, when you're standing in any corner of the living room or the dining room, your eye line just follows that along. And as you go up that stairwell now, it's just so much more dramatic as you see the framing and the lining of the woodwork as it was intended to be seen, framing those little skinny windows.
We have a question about what your favorite design features of the house are, and I think you've been sort of running through them as we've been talking. It sounds like you definitely have some things that really move you
corner windows,
cornered
especially
windows.
upstairs, it makes those rooms so bright. And it really draws your eye to the outdoors and brings the outdoors in this organic nature.
I mean, you're in the treetops, and so it's as though you've got this cornered glass solarium outside in one of the bedroom windows in the smallest bedroom, which is our office. It's much more open, and because Monona, it's very hilly there. We're in the driftless area of northeastern Iowa. So as you look out, you can see a little bit of town, but not much of town, and beyond. We've got great views of the fields as they roll the fields of grass that in the summertime, looks like the ocean out there as it gets blown around in the wind. So it's very enchanting.
And then of course the stucco on the exterior.
Oh.
We seem to be the only American system of home that still has its original stucco on it. And it is absolutely gorgeous. There are bits of quartzite in it that sparkle in the sunlight, and so the house, the material that's covering the house, seems to move with the light, and it's just breathtaking.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. Now the Elizabeth Murphy house in Shorewood has our identical stucco in its interior porch, which has been closed in. It likely was more open originally, but it was so wonderful our first time walking into that house and going, oh my God, it's
our stucco.
It's our stucco.
Thicker though, because it hasn't had 100 years of weather.
Exterior wear and tear, but yeah, we're pretty thrilled that it's still valiantly clinging on out there.
Kind of remarkably, for a house that in Northeast Iowa has lived through 100+ winters and punishing storms. And in fact, our first winter there in 2013, 2014 was when we had the big Arctic blast that kind of settled over the Midwest. And that's when we found out that those corner windows are lovely, but they're also cold. So while we do love all the windows, they are cold. But that makes it even more remarkable that they were never pulled out, and that new windows weren't put in, and that's a testament to probably to the Olufsens, wanting to preserve that original element.
There's a full basement, isn't there?
There is, and as designed. It's been changed through the years, but there was intended to be a basement, and we do have the plans for that, the original plans, which even delineated how the basement should be organized. You had your furnace room, you had your coal room, you had your food storage, your root cellar sort of thing. Now our house. The basement immediately was changed only because of the decision of the Meiers to rotate our house 90 degrees on its lot from its intended. So our living room windows, our bank of 5 wonderful windows that now look off to the south side of our house, those are originally intended to face the street. And our house there, we do have a sister house on the south side of Chicago, in the Beverly neighborhood, the Howard Hyde house. And that house is a bit different from ours, but started off as a fellow M202. And so we share a lot of similarities with that house. But that house does face the way as intended. That's not to say that the Meiers went completely rogue in turning the house. These houses, part of the plan was that they were meant to be adaptable per location, so that there might have been in one of the plans a side porch that a prospective owner could opt not to have on their house because that might not work with their house, or it could be reversed. That could go on this side. The house could be turned, and so ours is 90 degrees. The Meiers thus made what would have been a side entry to the house a much more traditional frontal entry to the house. Back down to the basement, that meant that where the coal room had originally been intended to be now got put over on the side where the driveway was. It made sense. It was functional. That's where the, you know, the truck would come in. But that change by the Meiers, and then their decision to put a more solid wall between the living room and dining room, which were meant to be an more open flowing space, albeit with glass swinging doors in between and some built-ins, and then a series of glass windows, interior windows, going around the doorway to kind of give the illusion of a continuous space. They opted to go for a more traditional separation of their living room and dining room, but they did keep the swinging doors, and we have those.
And of course, we don't know why they made those decisions. You know, we have theories. You know, one of the theories about why they enclosed that wall is that, you know, there were starting to be shortages, lumber shortages and other shortages as the United States had entered World War I. So perhaps it just came down to a matter of practicality. They weren't able to get the windows, they weren't able to get the wood, you know, so they decided to enclose that. It does make for a small dining room, but again, it's full of windows, so it's forgiven.
It's also part of the story of the house then, although you're sort of conjecturing, it's still a layer to the history.
It is,
So,
yeah, it is indeed.
I had an interesting question, and we've talked about this, but what's it like for a gay couple to own a house out in Iowa, in a small town in Iowa?
That's a great question.
We've come a long way, I will say that. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. Michael grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. Neither of us had wonderful experiences. That was part of our reticence about buying the house. While we loved it immediately, in the back of our mind was, is this gonna be okay? And you know what? It's been wonderful. We've met a lot of really wonderful people. Everyone we've encountered has been very friendly. And I think that's a testament to where we've come as a society, but also that wonderful ability that gay people have of loving homes and investing in spaces and improving the spaces we're in.
We, at the end of our very first tour of the house, that was the question we asked our realtor, who subsequently, he and his wife became very, very dear friends. And we asked, all right, so we're really interested in this house. However, big hitch, you know, here we are, you know, and he was from that small town. And we said, what would it be like? What would this reception be like for us? And he said, there are going to be people who warmly and instantly embrace you. And there are going to be others who have an issue with it, but they're not going to say anything because they're going to be overridden by Iowa nice, which is, you know, a little trickle down effect from Minnesota nice, which I grew up with. So I'm well aware of it. But as Jason said, as we've discovered, you know, we get more comments about the house, about people's appreciation for the house.
About what we're doing to the house.
Yeah, and our friend, our realtor, he and his wife, she was a hairstylist in town. They're now retired, but she had all sorts of people in and out of her chair. And they would come when we would be at the house, they would come for dinner, and she would honestly share with us, you know, what the opinions were, and they were all favorable. It was people were driving by the house. They knew that she was friendly with us, and would say, those Chicago boys, we were known as, I think still locally known as, the Chicago boys, we really like what they're doing. Oh, look at the new paint color they did. Yes, that was a great improvement. Oh, we saw what they, you know, the landscaping.
And yeah, we hear that when people are walking by, you know, they wave or they yell, oh, wow, it's looking good. Yeah. All things that were surprising to us and probably a little bit of a salve to the wounds that we maybe carried from, you know, an earlier time of growing up in small towns.
Yeah. So long story, long answer, but
yes.
The short answer is it's been surprisingly wonderfully wonderful. So yeah.
Well, it's partly a testament to the importance of stewardship and how much people appreciate that.
Yes.
Hopefully, regardless of whatever issues they may or may not have.
Yeah.
So, couple more just to finish up. I think we'll finish up with the comments that we have. And I think the fireplace brick is not standard Roman, but it does remind me of the brick that's in the ASBH that's open to the public on Burnham Block. Is it similar to that?
It's very similar to that, and that was something else I failed to mention earlier in talking about an on-site adaptation, and also as Jason was talking about, when our house was going up, the foundation was laid at the beginning of April 1917, and on April 6th, 1917, the United States entered World War I. The Meier's daughter had relayed to previous owners, and then her son has let us know as well that it became a problem. Material shortages did become a problem very specifically during the construction of the Meier House and across the American System Built Home entire enterprise, but for our house specifically. So we don't know if it was just, in terms of that brick, was it an aesthetic choice on behalf of the Meiers, or was it an actual functional, we just can't get the Roman brick, so we're going to source something ornate in its own way, but that will serve.
And you know, the color of the brick is the most interesting part. So you probably noticed in the video that when we bought the house, the fireplace brick was painted this dark gray with a white mantle put on it. So we took the mantle off and we started stripping the brick, and we're fully expecting standard red brick under there. So we get through that layer of gray, we get through, I'm guessing, about 15 layers of white, and we get down to gray brick. And we were both so surprised by that, thinking, well, this can't be it. This must be more paint. But no, that's the brick. It's gray with little specks of red in it, little specks of green and blue. It's a beautiful brick.
Yeah, it doesn't really translate in the video or in the photos, but when you see it in person, and you know, we could take it down, I'm sure, another layer of getting some more of the residue.
Well, not another layer, but getting it out of the cracks. And
the cracks, but
stripping brick, not easy. Especially indoors, because you know, we can't just sandblast it off. So it really is a manual process of scraping with a metal brush and getting off there.
You saw the picture of me with the mask in the video. That was before masking became cool. That's routinely us weekends at the house between wood stripping and brick stripping and painting and, you know, yeah.
Well, it is, you bring up the issue that stripping is a very delicate inside or outside. It's a very delicate process that you want to be very careful about. So your reticence about overdoing is not necessarily misplaced. So one last comment, and this sort of speaks to, I'm a big Iowa fan. And I don't mean any sports team or anything like that. I'm just a big fan of the state. And one of our people comments about the Eagle Point Park in Dubuque. Have you been there?
Yes.
It's pretty spectacular. Alfred Caldwell, up on a bluff over the Mississippi. Caldwell was very, very influenced by Wright's stonework at Taliesin. You can really see it there. It's a spectacular place to go. We have Wright public sites, Cedar Rock, Stockman House in Mason City, and of course the Park Inn in Mason City. So there's lots to see there.
And you know, there's actually a model of our home in the visitor center at the Stockman House. Was it our first summer after buying the house? We went to go see the Stockman House because, you know, that era of race designs and the ASBs were so similar. So we went there looking for cues of what we could do, you know, to our house. And we walked into the visitor center, and there is our house, like in this display. And we were so surprised to see that.
We really appreciate that Iowa takes its architectural history very, sincerely, and to its crest. It really embraces its architectural history, and we've been so pleased by the response from fellow Iowans who have reached out to us from Mason City particularly, but people in Des Moines, people in Dubuque. Yeah, it's been really wonderful being a part of the Iowa architectural community, I guess.
Oh, we didn't mention that I wrote the introduction to your book.
Yes, and that needs to be mentioned, and loudly. John wrote a wonderful introduction that really speaks to exactly what we've been talking about, which is the nature of stewardship, which is, you know, our approach to the book and to telling the story it's really more the story of this house, of this living, breathing home over 100 some years, but placed certainly within the history of the American System-Built Homes project and Wright's bigger career for sure. But John wonderfully sets up the book, and I encourage you all to read it, if not for what we've written, for John's introduction, because it's really something pretty phenomenal.
And our hope, you know, as John mentioned, there are 2 books about American System-Built Homes that just came out this year. Well, ours is coming up. You know, our hope is this renewed interest in American System-Built Homes means that others will be discovered, and that the ones that are existing will be properly appreciated. You know, because we want these houses to stick around. Right.
People, if you have a chance, go, if you're anywhere near Milwaukee, do go arrange to visit the Burnham Block if you haven't already. It provides a tremendous view into the variety of what this program was going to be. It wasn't just going to be single family homes, bungalows and 2-story homes like ours, but 2 flats, apartment complexes. It was a really grand plan to provide this really architecturally distinctive, affordable housing for people, certainly with a very Wrightian stamp to it all. But
you can even make an overnight of it. One of those 2 flats on the Burnham Block is available on Airbnb, and we did that when we were working on the house, on the book. Because we thought, oh, how nice to go into this space and spend the night and like really work intensely on the book. And then a snowstorm came and we kind of got stuck there, but it was lovely.
What a place to be stuck.
Okay, well, this has been great. Thanks so much for the video and for your insight, and really looking forward to holding the book in my hands.
You know, one of the things we've really missed during the pandemic is having people come into the house. We probably should have known, but we were naive and not realizing that we would have a lot of drop-in visitors and looky-loos who would drive very slowly by taking photos of the house. And whenever we're home, if someone stops by and rings the doorbell, we're always like, come on in, we will talk your ear off about this house.
As you, got a little dose of.
And now we know that we can sell them a book. But it's been nice doing these virtual things because, you know, with the pandemic, it's been, you know, almost 2 years now that we haven't been able to welcome folks into the house. So this is our way of doing it for now.
And it's been wonderful. Thank you for hosting us this evening and inviting us to talk to you all. And we appreciate all of you certainly listening in. And we know that there are some friends out there listening in, and a special shout out to a wonderful friend from Australia who's tuning in tonight. But again, thank you. We hope you'll enjoy our book. It's available now on Amazon. You can pre-order. You'll get an alert. What we're understanding is sometime next week, and that the books will be shipping. But do also certainly check into your local bookstores. Please support your local bookstores if at all possible.
Well, thank you very much, and we will see everyone soon, hopefully. Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks all.